Recording in progress.
The time is 6:46. This is a special study session for the city of Emeryville. Madam Clerk, the roll.
Councilmember Pryforce.
Here.
Councilmember Solomon.
Here.
Councilmember Welch.
Here.
Vice Mayor Carr.
Present.
And Mayor Mora.
Present.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion to approve the final agenda?
Motion to approve the final agenda.
Second.
Madam Clerk, the roll.
Councilmember Pryforce.
Aye.
Councilmember Solomon.
Aye.
Councilmember Welch.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Carr.
Aye.
And Mayor Mora.
Aye. Members, do we have any ex parte communications? Seeing and hearing none, now is the time for public comment. Members of the public may come to the podium. You'll have 2 minutes. Seeing no members of the public, we will now move to item 6.1, the study session to discuss the 5-year general fund projection and budget strategies.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Brian Mora from Regional Government Services, Finance Consultant. And tonight we're going to kick off the 25-27 proposed budget hearings for the council with a discussion of the updated 5-year model and some of the general fund challenges and options that you have in front of you. Next slide. So here's a quick background on the budget process. The City of Emeryville has a 2-year budget. Currently, you're in the second year of your current 2-year budget. That'll end on June 30th. And then the Finance Department has been working on the next 2-year budget, which starts on July 1st. The schedule is tonight we're going to have a discussion of the 5-year model. Then on May 20th, we'll have a discussion of the draft budget, and then it'll go to the various budget committees you have, and then on June 3rd, it'll be up for adoption. Next slide. So we'll start off with a review of the current 2023-25 budget. Next slide. This is the 5-year forecast contained in the 2023-25 budget. The significance here is that it shows a deficit in the general fund for all 5 years ranging from 2.7 million to 6.4 million. It also is a little unusual in that the unassigned general fund balance starts out at 18%, and by the end of the 5 years it's projected at -16. Next slide. A couple things worth highlighting in the current budget. One is that similar to budgets in the city since 2020 for the last 5 years, the budget contained continued warnings about the structural deficit in the general fund and that deficit was not sustainable. The budget was also a little unusual in my experience because the focus of the budget, rather than keeping the general fund at a sustainable level, instead was focused on keeping the economic uncertainty reserve at a certain level, which seemed to me a little bit backwards. It's worth noting here that the Government Finance Officers Association, also known as the GFOA, has a national standard that recommends that local governments, which would include cities and counties, maintain an unrestricted general fund balance of no less than 2 months' worth of cash, which equals 16.7%. And what's notable here is that the city's budget, the current budget, only met the standard in the first year, but did not meet that standard in years 2 through 5. Next slide. So in terms of the performance in the general fund over the last 2 years, in July of last year at the midpoint in the 2-year budget, projections showed that both years of the budget were going to have increased deficits over projections, and the city began to research opportunities and strategies. The 23-24 budget ended with a general fund deficit that was $2 million higher than projected, primarily due to the IRS settlement where the city became subject to Social Security payments. In the following year, the current year, the deficit increased to $8.8 million versus $2.7 million budgeted. And some of the key factors for that were a drop in fees, primarily development fees of $4 million, a $1.3 million drop in sales tax rather than a projection of 3.5% growth per year. And this was offset somewhat by increases in your utility tax revenues and your investment income. Expenditures were also over budget estimates by about $3 million. This was due to 2 years of the Social Security payments, which were initially unanticipated, and also labor agreements that were higher than the original budget estimates. And this was offset somewhat by vacant positions. Next slide. So addressing the 24-25 budget deficit, a couple things occurred in March which were of note. First of all, the City Council took several key actions upon the recommendation of your two budget committees. You transferred $3.2 million per year in residual property tax payments to the general fund, providing a new ongoing source of revenue. You also transferred $7 million from the economic uncertainty and capital funds to bring the general fund up to the 20% goal. You combined the disaster reserve and economic uncertainty funds, and you finally assigned $3.3 million in economic uncertainty funds for the future Social Security settlement, which is yet to occur. And then a couple weeks later was the unanticipated Sutter property transfer tax revenues. This was when Sutter purchased the Biomed site, and that generated $11.2 million in one-time money in commercial property transfer tax. This is pursuant to the terms of Measure O, which the voters passed in 2022. And this further strengthened the general fund balance in the current year. However, it's worth noting that Sutter, as a health foundation in California, is exempt from future taxes, which means they will not be paying property taxes, business license tax, et cetera, to the city of Emeryville in the future. Next slide. So now we move on to the 25-27 proposed budget. Next slide. This is the updated or the new 5-year general fund forecast. And there are a couple things to note here. First of all, the projected deficit in the general fund has continued to get worse. In this round, the projection is anywhere from $9.7 million deficit next year all the way up to $14.6 million in the 5th year. In the yellow band, what we're showing you is some of the initial thoughts about how those negative numbers might be addressed, and that would include taking into account the typical 5% vacancy factor the city has, which would save somewhere on the order of $1.4 to $1.6 million a year. We also show transfers from other funds into the general fund. You'll notice that in the first year, we don't really have much of that because, again, the Sutter money is still there. Your general fund is still at a 31% level, so there's not a need for additional funds. But starting next year, or excuse me, the following year, we're looking at transferring $4 million out of the economic uncertainty reserve into this fund. And then in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th year, the amount of money being transferred significantly increases. But you will notice here that unlike the previous budget, all 5 years show the general fund at or above the 20% benchmark. So again, our focus this go-round is rather than focusing on the reserve, we're focusing on the general fund's health. Next slide. So again, this is kind of some of the highlights. The key factors here in terms of the increasing deficit are things like we're anticipating that the sales tax and your fees are going to be relatively flat with a very slow growth over the 5-year period rather than the more ambitious projections in your last budget. We're also factoring in the increased Social Security costs, the final year of the 5% labor agreements, which will be next year, and then increased costs in general. And then in terms of, the obvious question about will these numbers change, it really is a function of several things. If revenues come in ahead of projections, or if you get any one-time unanticipated revenues, not unlike the Sutter revenue, the deficit could go down. Conversely, if things like the tariffs and the downturn in the economy at the local and national level continue, if the decline in consumer confidence continues, that will tend to reduce your sales tax revenue. And right now, the consumer index is at its lowest point since the 1950s, so that's a real risk. And then another related issue has to do with the stock market. The rates that the city is charged for its retirement under the CalPERS program are calculated in large part based on investment returns. And every June 30th, the CalPERS organization calculates their annual return. If it's below a certain benchmark, the rates go up, although that's phased in over a 5-year ramp-up period. So we're all waiting to see between now and June 30th whether the stock market returns will go up. I'm not real optimistic that that would happen, but it's possible. But that's another potential cloud looming out there for you. Next slide. So now we roll into some of the budget strategy options that the city has. Next slide. The first one is the one we've talked about, which is essentially depending on your reserves and your fund balances. And because the city has been so good about its reserves and its fund balances over the years, you have a substantial amount of money in these categories that you can draw upon over the next few years, even with the large deficits that you're looking at. However, as the finance department went through this process of modeling and looking at what's possible, what we found was that even though you literally could absorb all 5 years of those deficits using these one-time monies, by the end of the 5 years, you'd be pretty close to exhausting some of these funds. And so I don't think you really want to approach it that way. But you can see on this slide some of the measures that we would have to take and the amount. I mean, you're talking about things like taking almost $19 million out of your Section 115 pension reserve, using a pretty good chunk of your economic uncertainty reserve, taking money to the capital program, et cetera. So it's an option you have, but it's not really one that would be recommended. Next slide. So now we get into the question of revenue measures, and I think what I could say here is that this is a very different picture today than what you were looking at last year. Last year, you will recall that in August, the Budget and Governance Committee began looking at revenue measures, and the staff reported to them at that time that there were 4 different options and that they would, in aggregate, bring in $4.2 million, and that of that, $2.4 million would have been sales tax, a quarter cent that you have remaining. And because of that, there was some energy around sales tax at the time. Since that time, I've been working with your finance team, and we've been trying to look at this and also get into a lot more detail and try to really fine-tune these numbers. And so a couple things were changed. One is we put the parcel tax and facility district option that the city looked at in 2022 but did not move ahead with back on the list because this has the potential of raising $3.5 to $5 million a year. But in addition, we also looked at the other revenues. And while the sales tax number is consistent with the estimate from before, although we've lowered it a bit because your sales tax has been lowered a bit, it's now 2.1 million, not 2.4 million, you'll see that the other revenue items have significantly increased in terms of their revenue potential. The business license tax is now anywhere from $4 to almost $10 million. Tax is now up to almost $2 million a year, and your hotel tax is up to $1 million. And so if you add all of those together, you're looking at almost $20 million a year in revenue potential, which interestingly would more than cover your entire deficit, even in the worst case scenario. So I think that revenue measures are probably going to be part of the solution to the issue long term. And another thing in this area, and we talk about it later in the slide here, is that you do need to think about the timing of these measures in terms of your election cycles, because you can only put these on during general elections. So you're looking at 26, 28, and 30 during this 5-year model. But if one or more of these revenue measures were put on the ballot, voters approve them, the need for tapping into your reserve and fund balances, or the need for budget cuts, would be significantly reduced and potentially even eliminated altogether. It's also the case, because you do have, we are showing you this projection over a multi-year period, that it may be the case that you might choose, if you're pursuing one or more revenue measures, to do them 1 or 2 at a time rather than doing them all at once. In other words, phasing them out. Next slide. And then we get to budget cuts. Obviously, in the budget estimate, we do have the 5% vacancy rate already baked in, so that's a budget cut right there. But beyond that, obviously, there's always the option of reducing the budget in terms of both money and staff. However, this would require, if you only depended on budget cuts and nothing else, some pretty significant reductions. Remember, this is a $60 million budget in the general fund. 10% of that budget would be $6 million. So you can see, to get to $15 million, that would be some pretty aggressive reductions if that was the sole option. Obviously, all three of these can be sort of mixed and matched. You don't necessarily have to do all one or all of the other. But we thought for purposes of tonight's discussion to lay all of this out at the front end of the budget process so you could begin to think about what your options are going forward. I think it's also important, too, to note that when we bring you the draft budget next time, at your next meeting, we're only going to be talking about the first 2 years of the 5-year cycle, namely 25-6 and 26-7. But again, as I indicated earlier, having a 5-year model and looking at the process over a longer horizon, I think makes a lot of sense because you can begin to strategize about not only what's happening in the 2 years in front of you, but also what's going to happen in the next 2-year cycle and after that. Next slide. So in terms of our recommended strategy, what we would suggest is that in the first 2 years of the budget, in the first year, we would depend upon your prior year actions, the staff vacancies and Sutter money, and not take any more aggressive actions beyond that. In the second year, we would recommend that we take $4 million out of the Economic Uncertainty Fund to stay at the benchmark level, and then also during 26-7, and probably even earlier than that, begin to have a discussion about what direction you want to go for the future years, whether that's revenue measures and or budget reductions. And if you're interested in the revenue measures, we would suggest that you begin to entertain that sometime this fall, around September, once we have all the studies complete and all the numbers ready for your review. And then, as we note in the 3rd through 5th year, this is where really the big challenges come, because you might look at new revenues or you might look at budget cuts, but again, if you don't have new revenues and your one-time revenues are beginning to fade, we think that budget cuts are definitely in your future. So it's going to be challenging, but particularly so in years 3 through 5. Next slide. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Members, any questions?
I have a question.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much, Brian, first of all, for all your help that you have provided over the time period since we've been trying to get a financial department director.
Mm-hmm.
Really appreciated all your knowledge, all your expertise, very helpful.
Thank you.
The question I have is about the pilot that we had discussed as one of the things that we could do. It's, I believe, payment in lieu of taxes,
Correct.
which you've been very successful with in Burlingame. We discussed those models. I would like for you to please share about that
Sure. Be
as
happy
part
to.
of a revenue measure.
Sure. I'd be happy to, Vice Mayor. And you are correct. That's yet another opportunity. We didn't specifically call it out. Pilot, payment in lieu of taxes, and congratulations, you've earned your local government acronym degree for tonight. Basically, what has happened in the Bay Area over the last several years is as Sutter has opened medical facilities around the Bay Area, in each of those cities, they've also come, as part of a development agreement process, come to pay each of those cities money in lieu of tax revenue because of the fact there's a loss of revenue. The different cities have handled it differently, in part because of both their revenue and budgetary needs and also the facility. So for example, in the city of Palo Alto, which was the first one that I was aware of, they have an agreement with Sutter that Sutter pays them $75,000 a year, which goes into their general fund as an in lieu payment. In the city of Mountain View, which also has a medical center similar to Palo Alto, they elected to take a one-time payment from Sutter rather than an ongoing payment like Palo Alto. So they got a one-time $5 million payment from Sutter. And then most recently, San Carlos, and this is the one I'm most familiar with because I was involved in negotiating that particular deal in San Carlos, the city elected again to take the ongoing payment to the general fund, not a one-time payment. And this one was a little unique because what they did is they took the $10 million, which was what Sutter agreed to with the city, and they put it into the Silicon Valley Foundation in an interest-bearing account. And then the city receives what's called a target payment. I'm not sure where that terminology came from, but anyway, it started out at $675,000 in the first year, and then it grows by 3% per year over time for the next 50 years. And part of the arrangement with Sutter is that if the interest from the $10 million investment in the foundation is not sufficient to meet the terms of the city's target amount, then Sutter will replenish, I think is the term, the amount of money in the foundation to get it to where it needs to be to make those annual payments. So I think each of those city models are things that the city of Emeryville could look at as you begin to prepare for your negotiations with Sutter in terms of a development agreement, which I understand is part of the intent in this project as well. And I think, Vice Mayor, you are correct that that could also be obviously an additional source of funds for the city. It's a somewhat involved process. Usually you have to bring in outside legal help and economists and other folks. And I believe in the San Carlos example, I think we spent about 2 or 3 years pulling all that together. So it won't happen overnight, but if it is something that is a priority for the city and the council, it's something certainly to be considered.
Thank you.
Other questions? Member Pryforce.
Thank you, Mayor. Brian, it's been just great you working with us, and even as we are welcoming a new member of our team in terms of finance, I hope that they have the same wit and candidness that has been refreshing ever since you started working with the city. I have questions around the business license tax.
Mm-hmm.
In the sort of landscape analysis with other cities, have other cities, what was their cap as it relates to, or have any other city have had caps as it relates to the business license tax? Or is it just simply just raising that amount?
On business license tax, it can be all of the above. And I think one of the things that typically happens when you look at business license taxes, it gets very involved. You probably recall that one of my first comments about that was, if you're going to do it, you need to consult with your business community, the Chamber of Commerce, and you also probably are going to want to refer the matter to your Business and Governance Subcommittee before it gets to council, because there's going to be all sorts of options. In terms of our discussions with HDL, in fact, we're in the process of contracting with them to start the study. They've indicated that they believe that your rates are on the lower side compared to other communities, and so there's an opportunity to raise the rates to get a little closer to market. And the two numbers that you saw in the range were, I think the 3.7 million they characterized as if the city made a modest increase in the rates, whereas the $9 million would be more of a larger amount, as they called it. I think what will happen in the study process is you'll look at the number of categories you have. I think when I looked at it, you had like 41, which is way too many. Typically, in the more modern ordinances of this type, you get typically 4 to 6 categories. However, in cities that have older ordinances such as yours, it's not uncommon to have a lot of rates. And the reason for that is before the business license taxes required voter approval, it used to be something the city councils could do on their own. As new businesses came into town and new business types, the staff would come to the council and they would add categories. And so the number of categories grew and grew and grew. The problem is if you get to as many categories as you have, it becomes difficult to figure out exactly what category businesses fit into, particularly as new business types come online. So that will be part of the study. And I think that even though we're showing a range of 3 to 9 million, I think it's fair to say that as you get into the meat and potatoes of this, it could be the case that looking at the rates and the categories and whatever, the actual number might be somewhere in the middle. It might be maybe 4 or 5, 6 million, or whatever. There'll be all sorts of things to consider. On the cap question, it's, again, sort of all over the map. Some cities have caps, some don't. My experience is when you update a business license ordinance and you have a cap, the normal practice is to increase the cap as part of the reform or the modernization. However, you always have the option of eliminating it if you choose. At the moment, Emeryville has one business at the cap, and that business is paying $455,000 per year in business license tax, and it goes up each year. I think if you increase the rates as is envisioned in this study, you'll have more than one business at the cap. So part of the discussion is going to be, if you pursue a business license tax increase, not only what are the categories and what are the rates in the categories, but also what do you do with the cap? Do you increase it? Do you eliminate it? I know, for example, in the peninsula, where I'm based, 2 of the cities increased the cap, and a third eliminated it altogether. So, for example, in, I think it was Redwood City, the cap used to be $7,000, and they increased it to $250,000. In Foster City, they took the cap from $28,000 to $250,000, and each of those cases still way below where your cap is. But then in the third city, in South San Francisco, the cap was $1 million, and they removed it altogether. So I think all of those things are on the table when you look at this particular tax, and you could consider raising the cap, eliminating the cap. But again, that's the sort of thing, I think, as you get into it, and also in your discussions with the business community, I'm sure they'll have some feelings about that, particularly either if they're already at the max or with your new rates, they could be. And again, to get to 3 to 9 million, we're talking about some pretty significant rate increases now, because most of your rates haven't changed since the 1990s. Perhaps that's to be expected by some, but again, given the magnitude of what's on the table, you know, I'm sure it'll get some reaction.
Member Pryforce.
Thank you. So with the business license tax, your recommendation in terms of ballot measures, since these would have to be general election measures, which is pretty much every 2 years, then let's just say if we limited it to about one or two measures, the business license tax, the conversation, and I believe that this question extends to, beyond you, Brian, and perhaps the city attorney, city manager, and maybe Chad, if you can help with that, that the business license tax is something that we can actually do on our own as a city council, or it would have to be a measure.
It has to be a measure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, all 5 of these have to go to the voters.
Okay.
I think to your point about how many measures you'd put on a ballot and how many you would do outreach on, typically the way this works is you have a study session in the fall ahead of the election. You look at the 5 measures, and the council says, we think these 2 or these 3 are the ones we'd like to pursue. The pollsters, in my experience, generally don't like to poll on more than 2, although if you really push them, they might look at a third. So I think there'll be some discussion and selection by this council in terms of what are those 2 or 3 that you'd like to take a closer look at. And at that point, usually you have an outreach firm that helps you do some outreach and tell the story to the community, why you need the money and why these are the options. And then the pollster will frame some questions, and you'll get some data back in terms of what is the public's feeling, or more specifically the voters' feeling about these measures. Are one or more of them at a level that could pass? It's also worth noting that of these 5, the parcel tax and the facility district take a 2/3 vote, the others take a majority. And that might also influence your thinking about which ones to advance. But it's also the case when you get the polling data, you have to look now at, do you have 2/3 support on that one versus the other 4 majority. But you know, I've had experience in the last few years working on different RGS projects where in one city they put the business license tax and the hotel tax on the same ballot, and both passed. And they also increased their downtown parking rates because it was a tourist-based economy. And that one, to your point, that one is something the council can adopt. On another city, they elected to do only one at a time. So the first year they did, it was actually a half-cent sales tax. And then the following 2 years later, they did the hotel tax. And part of their incentive was they had a $2 million deficit, and the sales tax would have generated more than $2 million. So they said, since both hotel and sales tax have polled high enough to pass, and we need $2 million, clearly we want to do the sales tax first, and then we can do the hotel tax 2 years later. And the good news for them is they both passed. So I think there's different philosophies in terms of how you do these, whether you want to have multiple measures on or not, or just one. But I think in terms of in the fall, when you look at all this, it is probably likely that you'll want to narrow the list a little bit, just because the pollsters is going to probably tell you can't really poll on all 5. So,
Member Pryforce.
Thank you. The staff vacancies with the staff vacancies and a priority, a strategic plan priority being researching revenue measures for 2026, and perhaps the city manager, perhaps you can answer that question as well. Would we need to fill any positions as it relates to any revenue building? For example, any grant writers or anyone who we would need to add on as a result of this drive. And I know it's pretty early, but is that something that we might have to do?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Pryforce. The 5% number is a number that's reflected that in any given year, the city maintains about a 5% vacancy rate, not because we decided not to fill the positions, but because of the time that it takes to recruit. An average recruitment is about 3 to 6 months, and so that's about 3 to 6 months of salary savings. And so we calculated all of that. The last vacancy report that you received was in March, and I think it was about 19 vacancies. And so we calculated that, and that's the number that we came up with, and we just feel with the size of our current HR department, we will probably always run at about a 5% vacancy rate just as a result of the recruitment process. So that's one. I do think, yes, council gave us approval in March to consider hiring a consultant firm to support the city's advancement for additional grant research and grant writing as needed, and that is something we will probably utilize when that time comes. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you for making it clear so that we wouldn't necessarily be adding staff. We would be more so outsourcing staff as it relates to.
We wouldn't be adding staff. We will continue to fill, but it just takes us time to fill the recruitment process. So that's where that number comes from.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. I've gotten several questions around, well, why don't you just hire a grant writer? Why don't you just, and so this helps a lot in clarifying that. Thank you.
I would say, too, that on hiring a grant writer, that has been something in the last 2 years a number of cities have done. And I think we talked about that at an earlier meeting, that the cost is somewhere in the area of maybe $60,000 to $65,000. And I think the way the other cities have looked at it is, even if we get one grant of, say, $100,000, we've more than made up for the cost of that grant writing assistance. But on the other hand, I think everyone needs to be clear that given the magnitude of your general fund deficits, grants aren't going to get you there, because not only the size of them is not sufficient to cover it, but also, again, it's back to that discussion of it's one-time money. So usually for grants, what you really want to look at are things like, do you have specific programs or initiatives? Is it in the environmental area or youth or other park-related things where a one-time grant would help you? And I think it's certainly worth pursuing. But again, in the context of this discussion, I'm not sure it's going to materially help you on your multi-million-dollar deficit problem.
Thank you. You've answered all my questions. Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Brian, on that issue, I just want to explore what your ideas or thoughts would be if there is a foundation like the Silicon Valley Foundation in which the pilot would put funds in. Would that kind of foundation also be eligible for potentially annual grants if we structure it such a way?
I think there are two different things. The grants basically tend to be from the state and federal government, and they tend to be for specific types of things like EV charging stations or citizen outreach or parks or various things. The use of the foundation in San Carlos was more a question of, if Sutter's willing to front the money and park it somewhere, I think they kind of wanted to have an arm's length relationship in terms of the money. It's like, we'll give you a check, and you can either have it up front like Mountain View, or you can put it in an investment, and then you figure out where to invest it. And I think because San Carlos had done work previously with the Silicon Valley Foundation, they thought that would be a good vehicle to use. But here in the East Bay, I'm imagining there are foundations and other organizations one could work with, or financial institutions even, to set up a similar vehicle. So they're different, but again, both worth pursuing.
Thank you, Brian. Seeing no further questions, I'd like to take public comment on this item. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment on the 5-year general fund projection? Seeing none, I'll bring this back to the council for discussion. And I would just like to note that this is a purely informational item. As Brian mentioned, we will be considering potential revenue measures to consider more seriously in the fall. Member Pryforce.
I just want to thank Vice Mayor Carr for mentioning the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, and that foundations are very interesting and tricky. Silicon Valley Community Foundation has more money than pretty much every foundation in the United States, and so and then yet at the same time, the amount of money they actually use is it's almost negligible compared to what they actually have. It's one of the biggest issues that we talk about a lot in the philanthropy community, and so you have whether or not we can create a foundation, and then that foundation can sort of offset, and it's one of the things that I've explored with with the Promise Initiative, that we can create something that can offset some of the expenses that we make as a city. So, for example, if we create that private foundation can actually create a grant that either the city can apply for, or an organization within the community can apply for, and then that's granted. Let's say swimming. Let's say we want to make swimming free for everyone, for community groups. So when we do that, then any costs related to so even if swimming is free, any costs related to maintaining the pool, those sort of things, would be a part of that grant, and then we wouldn't have to necessarily spend that kind of money, as a city. And so, so then the question is the foundation sort of is it just holding money as a fund, and then and just collecting interest, or is it actually a very actionable foundation? And that's something that that we as a city can actually create, and then we can actually push many of our businesses to invest in that particular foundation. And so that's something that I definitely would be happy to explore in the future. But other than that, I just want to say thank you for thinking outside the box as it relates to how we can close some of the gaps in terms of services that we can provide in the city, using both public and private partnerships.
Members, any other comments? Member Solomon.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of reflections that came up during Brian's presentation. Thank you again, Brian, for that. So one is, just to, I know everyone on the council knows this, but just to repeat that we are certainly not the only city dealing with deficits of this kind. And, I think we are in a better position than many to navigate the choppy waters. And the second is the amount of uncertainty that Brian mentioned as we go forward, just in terms of both our revenue coming in, that's partially due to the larger economic forces which are completely outside of our control, and no one knows where those are going. But then the third is, we talk about revenue generation, and something I think would be helpful to include as part of that conversation is, how can we maximize revenue from the business that is currently conducted in the city that's not raising taxes, in addition to raising taxes potentially, that is, increasing business, increasing the number of people coming here to shop and, generate revenue for our sales tax, increase the number of businesses. So I know that's something that Chad and the community development team are working on, but important to include sort of the full range of revenue options for our city. So thank you again to Brian, and I think the presentation was very useful, and I look forward with the council to making the challenging choices as to how we fill the gap.
I'd also just like to thank the staff, Brian and others, for helping us understand the scope of the deficit facing the city. It's quite a difficult financial challenge, to say the least. I think it's worth kind of making a distinction between things that the city can do on its own, which we are doing, such as negotiating development agreements with new businesses, recruiting additional businesses, promoting economic activity. These are all things that the city and staff are working hard at every day. So I trust that, and hopefully we can change that flatline economic forecast if things start to turn up for the city. But the way I see the revenue measures, these are distinct big picture items. These are things that we need to go to the voters for. The parcel tax, sales tax, the business license tax. So I appreciate that we are studying those more. They need to be fleshed out. We need to know what we're asking the voters for. And then hopefully we'll know enough to hopefully settle on 2 or 3 in the fall. But it's looking likely that we're going to have to adopt some sort of revenue measure, because if we don't, the financial outlook starts to look quite dire. And I just wanted to note for that analysis, it's very important to consider the surrounding cities, San Francisco, Berkeley, Oakland, and look at where do we fall currently on those taxes. And I think that will be helpful to, at least it would help this council understand where we're competitive, where we're falling behind. Certainly, we don't want to be an outlier in terms of any one of these taxes to discourage that sort of economic activity. So those are my comments. Any other remarks? The time is 7:29. This meeting is adjourned. The time is 7:29. This is a regular meeting of the City of Emeryville as successor agency to the Emeryville Redevelopment Agency. Madam Clerk, I'd like to note that all members are still seated. Members, do we have a motion to approve the final agenda?
Motion to approve the final agenda.
Second.
Madam Clerk, the roll.
Councilmember Pryforce,
Aye.
Councilmember Solomon,
Aye.
Councilmember Welch,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Carr,
Aye.
and Mayor Mora.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Members, do you have any ex parte communications to report? Seeing none, now is the time for public comment for the consent agenda or items not.
Mr. Mayor?
Now is the time for public comment on the consent agenda or items not on the agenda. Are there members of the public who would like to comment on the consent agenda? Seeing none, members, do we have a motion on the consent calendar?
Motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Madam Clerk, the roll.
Councilmember Pryforce,
Aye.
Councilmember Solomon,
Aye.
Councilmember Welch,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Carr,
Aye.
and Mayor Mora.
Aye.
Motion carries.
We have no action items. The time is 7:30. This meeting is adjourned. The time is 7:30. This is the regular meeting of the Emeryville City Council. Madam Clerk, I'd like to note all members are still seated. Do we have a motion on the final agenda?
I move approval of the final agenda.
Second.
Madam Clerk, the roll.
Councilmember Pryforce,
Aye.
Councilmember Solomon,
Aye.
Councilmember Welch,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Carr,
Aye.
and Mayor Mora.
Aye. There are no special orders of the day. Do we have any announcement of commission or committee vacancies?
Not this evening, Mayor, thank you.
Members, do we have any special announcements or reports on meeting attendance? Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I will share my report and takeaways from the attendance at City Leaders Summit that I attended from April 23 to April 25 at the Sacramento Convention Center. Council member Debbie Baker of the City of La Palma in Orange County shared that for operational efficiencies, ever since the pandemic, they have had only one council meeting per month, every month. Along with monthly committee meetings, which seems to be working really well for them. They are about the same size as the city of Emeryville and in population as well as square footage. I'm sharing this as this is something we could potentially consider if it makes sense for us to do so operationally for purposes of efficiencies and promoting those. So the second item from that meeting that I would like to share is that City Leaders Summit is oriented to meet with legislators and discuss city and regional issues and upcoming bills that the legislators are promoting. Our Assembly member Bonta graciously made time to meet with me in her office. She chairs the legislature's Health Committee and would like to initiate a meet and greet of the city leaders, herself and Senator Arahin with Sutter. This would, of course, have to be arranged within the Brown Act. I have also conveyed this to our city manager and am very much looking forward to this meet and greet, as this council has expressed the Sutter project as one of its core priorities. The third item is that the Sutter legislative representative reached out to me for a meeting, and we will be meeting later this week, and I will share further updates within the Brown Act. Lastly, this is not a Sutter report, not a city summit report of a meeting with employers. This is about a meeting with employers on Hubbard Street. Last week and this week, I met with some employers along Hubbard and at Emeryville Commerce Connection. We had that meeting with these businesses. They have expressed concerns regarding the 40th Street project affecting their commerce. They are looking forward to an updated study session, which the city manager had promised would occur. And I have one announcement. I will be attending the Civic Leaders Conference. I think this is one of the largest conferences that happens for children and nature. And I was invited to that by Susan Donaldson, who's sitting right there. She is on the Emory School Board. And I'm looking forward to that opportunity to bring back some good information for our city parks.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Any other announcements? Item 7 is the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to just draw the mayor, the council, and the community's attention to my consent item 10.5. It is my 100-day report. I have now been on the job here since stepping in this role on January 6, 2025. I'm super excited, and I've written a report just so that the community, the mayor, and the council can really take a quick look at the collaboration, at the work that we've accomplished together with this council, with this mayor, from moving major projects forward to deepening partnerships with residents, businesses, and of course, our very talented city team. I would like to just state to you all that I am genuinely inspired each day by the dedication of our community and our city staff, which is amazing. It is an honor to serve the city of Emeryville. This city leads with creativity. This city leads with resilience and care. And while there is a lot of work ahead, I remain optimistic, committed to working side by side with all of you to build a livable, safe, and vibrant community. And for our community members, if you happen to stop by our city lobby hall, you will see that there is a one-page strategic plan banner there so that the community and our staff can always remain focused and always be reminded of the work that the mayor and the council has done in adopting its strategic plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Latanya. Members, next is ex parte communications. Do you have any ex parte communications? Seeing and hearing none. Oh, Member Pryforce, go ahead.
I received a communication from Steve Shane of the Emeryville Historical Society as it relates to this grant process.
Member Welch.
I received the same communication.
Likewise.
Next, we have public comment for consent agenda items or items not on the agenda. Are there members of the public who would like to make public comment for items not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to the consent items. I understand that we have an amendment. Is that right, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mayor. Mike Roberts is going to explain the amendment on the consent agenda.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. I'm Mike Roberts, Senior Civil Engineer in the Public Works Department. And for item 10.4, which is the award of a design contract to Placeworks, we are needing to create an amendment to remove some conflicting language, which is an appropriation of funds. We do not need to appropriate funds to move this contract forward. So basically, in the subject line of the staff report, the last language after the not to exceed amount of $650,000 should be struck. Similarly, in the resolution, same language should be struck from the resolution. But the bodies of both the staff report and resolution otherwise can stay.
Thank you, Mike. Members, do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar as amended?
I move to approve the consent calendar as amended.
Second.
Madam Clerk, the roll.
Councilmember Pryforce,
Aye.
Councilmember Solomon,
Aye.
Councilmember Welch,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Carr,
Aye.
Mayor Mora.
Aye.
Motion carries.
We have no public hearings, and we have one action item today. This is 12.1, resolution of the City Council of the City of Emeryville adopting the Community Promotion Grant Subcommittee recommendations. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, Mayor Mora, Vice Mayor Carr, and the rest of the City Council. I'm here to present to you on our Community Promotion Grant Subcommittee's recommendations. Next slide. Oh, and my name is Rebecca Sermeno. I'm the Community Services Director here at the city. So the purpose of our grants are to fund organizations and individuals that provide programs, events that benefit our community. Next slide. So the requirements to apply for a grant include the activity must happen in Emeryville and directly benefit our community. They must also obtain support depending upon location or program. They also have to sign an insurance affidavit as well as complete a proposed budget worksheet. Next slide. Upon grant approval, we will do a contract. They will also obtain an Emeryville business license, submit all the COI, the insurance certificates, indemnification of the city, as well as a W-9. Next slide. The process is, these are for programs and events for 2025, 2026. We had the applications were open from January 21st through February 26th through an online application process. We had 19 applications and all were qualified. And the subcommittee met on April 3rd, 2025. Next slide. The subcommittee here is the first year that we've had 5 members. Last year, with a recommendation from the council, we changed the makeup of the committee. This year, I went and presented at all the different committees, and they recommended individuals to be a part of the subcommittee. And so I would just really like to make a public appreciation to these 5 individuals who not only had to do homework in advance, but sat and processed and interviewed and asked some really great questions of all the applicants. And up here, Mike Haggerty with the Public Art Committee, Fran Quattel with the EDAC, Andy Eggers with Parks and Recreation, Beth Rosales with Commission on Aging, and Sarah Smaga with the Housing Committee. Next slide. The applicants were able to apply up to $10,000, and this year we have budgeted to award $73,500. This year's recipients included, recommended recipients are 3 new applicants this year: Friends of ECDC, Misfit Comeback Incorporated, and Rudy's Can't Fail Cafe. And the other 8 recommended have received grants previously. Next slide. And this will be a grid of the recommendations. It includes the organization's name, the grant name, how much they originally requested, and what was recommended to be awarded. Next slide. It was a really competitive process. The 5 individuals really spent a lot of time, going through the information, and but we had a lot of great applications. You can see here, these were the programs and events that were not recommended for any grant money this year. And that is the end of my presentation. There are several members of those who applied for grants here in the audience this evening, but I open it up to any questions that you might have.
Members, any questions for staff or any of the applicants?
I do have a question, Mayor.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Rebecca, you worked with I'm really grateful for all the work you did, getting together the committee, and also I appreciate the committee's efforts in doing all the hard work. It's total public service to go through all of it, and difficult decisions to make, especially because our city is so full of talent.
Correct.
So,
Yes.
so I understand that, appreciate all the work. My question is regarding how that selection was made. I remember last year we had discussed about the composition of committees. There was never any, I don't remember a study session on that issue. I know that it got referred to budget and governance, but I don't think the council got any resolution about that future agenda item. How was I guess I should ask, how was the committee composed? How did the selection occur? I'm just curious.
Yeah, with the recommendation from the Budget and Governance Committee, what we were able to determine is previously there were 2 members from the Parks and Rec Committee and 2 members of the Public Art Committee. And it really, not only 4 members, not exactly an easy voting process, but we were able to expand the members, the people that we wanted to have help make that decision. And that included the Bike and PED group, the EDACT, Economic Development, and the Commission on Aging, which were 3 groups that were not previously represented in this process.
Thank you.
To help that. Thank you.
Member Pryforce.
I'm sorry for clarification. So they weren't included in the process, and now they are.
This year,
Okay.
they were a part of the process, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
No, thank you. Yeah, it's great. Thank you.
I'd like to now open it up for public comment on this item. Are there members of the public who would like to comment on the community grant subcommittee recommendations? Yes, come to the podium. You'll have 2 minutes.
I'd just like to thank the committee again for giving us the grant to continue the music at the Golden Gate Library. And we appreciate it, and thank you very much. That's pretty much it. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer.
Thank you. Yes. Come to the podium. You'll have 2 minutes. Welcome.
Robbie Kendall with Fishnets and Film. I was not able to be here at the last meeting. My direct persona was here representing me, and I hope she was joyful. But I do want to thank you for the recommendation and for allowing us to continue to shed light where there's darkness on the LGBTQ plus community. I want to say I love living here in Emeryville and what you all do for the individuals that work here, the residents, and especially the artists that can help continue to make this a very diverse, vibrant community. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comment.
Hi, I'm Susan Donaldson. Most of you know me from the school board, but tonight I'm here with Emeryville Children in Nature, and so I just want to say thank you for recommending us for a grant this year as well. I've been working with kids of all ages at the school for years now. This is my 7th year on the board. But this project has been really amazing, and we are focusing on early childhood, but our pop-up events that are the focus of this grant are for kids of all ages, big, small, young, old. And it's really been amazing to see it firsthand, like how much fun and how engaging and how great it is for kids to engage, kids of all ages to engage with nature. And it's exciting to be in this city and a part of this and have your support. And we feel like we're really setting an example for other small cities across the country about increasing access to nature for kids who really need it these days especially. So thank you again for supporting us.
Thanks, Susan.
Hello, Rob Arias. I call myself the creative director of the Emeryville Historical Society, but small organization, wear a lot of hats. I'm here tonight with Emeryville Historical Society co-founder Don Hausler and Emeryville police officer and EHS grad Randy Orton. EHS has been creating this quarterly journal for its members for 35 years. We've added everybody behind the dais to the subscription list, so hopefully you receive this. This one details Emeryville's Black History, which we sent out for Black History Month in February. Thank you for the grant committee for recommending us for this latest funding, which would pay for a historic walking tour along San Pablo Avenue, whose history goes back before California was even a state. Our tour will focus on a strip of San Pablo Avenue that intersects Emeryville from 36th through 53rd and parts of the Emeryville Triangle neighborhood. We'll tell roughly 30 stories, including the city's first church. Didn't happen until 1982, before some of you were born. Berkeley Farms, their headquarters was Emeryville for 50 years. The Bank Club, it was once the Bank of Italy. Doggy Diner, you might have heard that story, was bombed by a leftist organization in the 70s. The original Emory High, and of course, Veterans of Foreign War post 1010, which is now the Emeryville Senior Center. So we also like to incorporate the tour into local businesses to give them a small boost. This tour will likely partner with Oaks Club or Bank Club, maybe Arizmendi, or another small business along the route. So this tour will be the 3rd of 5 we have planned for the city. Thus far created the Park Avenue District Tour, the Greenway Tour, and we have plans, obviously, after San Pablo for a Butchertown and Emeryville Marina Tour. So anyway, just want to express my appreciation for the grant recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any other members of the public? Welcome.
Hi, Mayor David Mora and Vice Mayor and City Council members. My name is Chelsea Marie Hill, and with me today is Alexa Coleman. Alexa and I are co-facilitators for the Dancing in the Schools program established by Nancy Carpin Dancers and the dance company's nonprofit New Arts Foundation. We are really elated to meet you all today and present for you guys because New Arts Foundation was established by Nancy, and she's currently out of the country on an artist residency in Europe. First and foremost, I want to thank you all, the mayor and city council members, for the generous support in the past. This support has been at the core of the success for the Dancing in the Schools program for the past 40 plus years. thousands of students have benefited from exposure and engagement with dance in the school program.
Yeah, and just a little bit about what we have been doing. New Arts Foundation has made Emeryville its kind of home base since its establishment in 1980. Our program specifically helps to fill the gap in arts education via dance, and we've done that the past 4 decades before either of us were here. We are the only arts organization to consistently offer such to the students of Emeryville, and with this program, they have the opportunity to work with professional dancers like ourselves, and we co-teach every class. And then at the end of the semester, students are able to walk away with a lot of pride, a lot of skills and confidence, which they're able to put on display for their family, friends, and their staff who've shown immense consistent support. Yeah, and so we want to thank you for considering supporting our 2025 program, and thank you, City Council, for their recommendations to the board for grant approval.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Any other members of the public? Welcome.
Hello, Mayor and Vice Mayor and City Council members. My name is Haley King, and I'm here on behalf of Misfit Combat. This is our first time applying for this grant. We're a relatively new gym. We started in my garage, so it's really beautiful to be standing here and be taking this moment to introduce myself to all of you. I just wanted to formally thank you for the recommendation. If awarded this grant, you would help us extend our free community programs. Some of them which would be 3-hour intensive self-defense programs for the neighboring Emeryville communities. We have a lot of Emeryville community members who see us as a neighborhood gym, who pop in, who have been interested in joining our gym for a long time now. And I was just here to say thank you so much, and it's great to meet you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? Seeing none, I'll bring this back to the council for discussion and comment. Member Welch.
I just wanted to say thank you to all the applicants and our city staff, our committee. I'm in so much support of all of these rewards because I think it reflects so much as what is important here in Emeryville and the investment that we're making in our community, music, dance, physical fitness, the arts, celebrating our outside spaces, STEM, preserving our history. These are things that we need to be investing in as a city, as a community, and such a focus on our young people who are our future. And so I am really excited to see us, just the broad diversity of what we're investing in and the applicants. And so I'm very excited and very much in support of moving forward with all of these rewards.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I absolutely agree with that. I am so grateful for this community, which brings such vibrancy to our city of Emeryville. We have, I have to say, we have everything from dance, kids of all ages. This kid really appreciates that. So we have history, we have science, we have adventure, we have so much going for our city. I just wish we had more money to give to make this even better. So I would love for all of the recipients to have got the maximum amount of award, but hopefully we'll be able to do that. I also support the decision made by the committee. Very grateful for their work on this.
Member Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to echo what the Vice Mayor and Councilmember Welch said. Thank you to city staff and the subcommittee for their time in making the hard decisions around which of the excellent applicants we wanted to move forward. And thank you to all of you for the time you're putting into this. For many of you, this is a labor of love, and know that the community is appreciative. It deepens the texture of the community and enriches all of our experiences living here and makes us one of the things that makes us such a wonderful place to live. So thank you, and I look forward to taking part in all of the different experiences, events, programs that, to the extent I'm eligible for them over the next year. So thank you.
I'd like to just say, well, I'd like to commend all of the applicants and the recommendations of the subcommittee. I don't envy them. It was not an easy job. There's so much talent in this city, and I just want to thank you all for helping make this city the vibrant city that we all seek to create. I'm glad that we can play a role to facilitate that, but thank you for making it as vibrant as we love to see it. Member Pryforce.
Rob Arias mentioned that none of us may be born before 1982, and I was born in 1980. So is it too late to revoke some of the grant? Making me feel old. I just want to say thank you all. This process is definitely, it's at its 2.0, in terms of the diversity of services that you've all provided. I was very happy to see self-defense added, that in actuality, there are many, in the grant-making space, there are many, there's a lot of support that's actually being issued to self-defense organizations and small businesses after the the Asian hate crimes began to spike. And so we've seen a lot of that happening. I want to give a shout out to Sobe Kick, I believe, that existed in Emeryville, but they didn't survive the pandemic. And so Emeryville has had self-defense services provided, but nothing like what you're doing in terms of being supported by the city. And so I like seeing this diversity of influences. In terms of, I'm sorry, this is some homework from me, but the 3.0 that I'd like to see. Okay, you ready? So in grant making, there's this area of technical assistance. And that what sometimes happens is during the life cycle of an organization, that the organization may go through really amazing sort of boosts in terms of support, like Nature and Children, right? And a shout out to them. And then other organizations may go through a crisis or may not grow at that same rate. And one of the ways to sort of guarantee success is to sort of have a cohort model where some of you may meet maybe once or twice a year, nothing too demanding because you all have a lot of work to do. And then perhaps we can provide some sort of help, see where they're at, see, hey, do you need some assistance with this? I mean, it could just even be, you may be struggling with your taxes. And so the city would like to, as a part of our technical assistance, provide some tax support for you all. So you don't have to think about that for next year. And so some sort of operational, some operational support that we have that would sort of allow you all to not just receive money, but receive love and support from the city, so that we can constantly check you in. And this could probably also fall under EDAC, because I've taught a lot that nonprofit organizations are considered private entities. And so thus, what we do shouldn't just be small businesses, it should be small businesses and nonprofits in terms of the kind of support that we can provide. And in actuality, even when it comes to our numbers, when we start thinking about applying for grants, they actually increase our diversity numbers when it comes to businesses when we look into that model, right? And so I just want to say thank you all. And we're constantly thinking about ways that we can support you, not just one-time grants, but hopefully maybe year-round. Thank you.
Members, do we have a motion on the resolution?
I'll move to approve the resolution.
Second.
Madam Clerk, the roll.
Councilmember Pryforce?
Aye.
Councilmember Solomon?
Aye.
Councilmember Welch?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Carr?
Aye.
And Mayor Mora?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next, we have department head reports.
Department head report from Public Works. We have our 2025 Bike to Wherever Day, Thursday, May 15th from 7 to 10 a.m. We'll have 4 Energizer stations throughout the city, one at 66th and the Greenway, one at Horton and Stanford Avenue, one at 40th and San Pablo, and one at 46th and Adeline. And we will also be continuing our popular Passport program from last year, where if you go to all 4 Energizer stations and get them stamped and you arrive earlier enough, you'll get a prize. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Next, we have future agenda item requests. Members?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and put this on agenda. I'm not quite sure if there is something like this already, and if there is, please, I would like the staff to go ahead and let me know. Today we heard in our study session that if the council and the voters do not move forward with one or more revenue measures as described in today's study session, there will be a need to consider budget cuts beyond the 5% staff vacancy factor. These cuts could be quite significant given the size of the general fund structural deficit in the next 5 years. This year, an organization reached out to me for internship opportunities, likely because I'm Sikh and this was a Sikh organization. It reached out to me for an opportunity that was paid for by the organization. It would involve our city or the council placing an intern on our staff, which was paid for or sponsored by the organization. I would like to explore what we can do to utilize these sponsored internships in a way that benefits our city, and how we can intentionally place talented students with such sponsored internships that both support their growth and contribute to the meaning of the city departments, creating a true win-win. I know we've had paid interns in the past, summer interns. Some of them, I guess, we now employ on our city staff because they were paid interns. I remember Charlie telling me that be good to the interns because they will be the future of our city. And I know that maybe we have some of these interns who are now our full-time employees, which is fantastic. If I would like to go ahead and bring this as a study session to see what we can do to consider these type of fellowships, so-called fellowships that are paid. It would just be beneficial for our budget if we are considering it that way. So that's something that I'd like to propose.
Alternatively, it sounds like this intern opportunity, it would be paid for by another organization, and it would be augmenting the city staff, so placed in some department. Is this not something that could be discussed maybe with the city manager, and if it suits her and the staff, maybe they could simply enact it? I don't know that it needs council action.
I have reached out, but there has been no response. The response I got, there is no such concept in our city. So I would like to explore this concept.
Mayor and Vice Mayor, I do think it's something that should stay within the operation because it has to do with hiring of staff to the city's budget, and that is within the city manager. And so that is something that we could look at without the council needing to take any action. And so I'm willing to look at that.
Okay, would you be able to work with the vice mayor on the details?
Absolutely, yes. We'll have the HR director check back in with her.
Great.
Thank you.
Second item.
Yes, go ahead.
I would like our city to explore the La Palma calendaring model of the one council meeting per month, plus monthly meetings that we have for committees, especially because the budget committee has met, or budget and governance. It's named budget and governance. The budget and governance committee has met only twice this year in bi-monthly meetings, and we almost didn't have the May meeting in time for the June budget because of the conflicts. So that's what we are doing in the first part of the year, exploring the budget. And I fear the items that we are sending to budget and governance under governance are going into a black hole simply because we are focusing only on budget items with no time to hear the governance items. So I would like to explore that model, or alternatively go back to having budget and governance monthly.
Members, is there support for this future agenda item? But I do think it sounds like a budget and governance item.
Madam Vice Mayor, if you're agreeable, I think that's something maybe we could look over on the Budget and Governance Committee.
As long as it doesn't go in the black hole, yes.
Yeah.
Members, is there support with a show of hands? It'll be added to the agenda for budget and governance. Members, any other future agenda items? Member Pryforce.
Yes, I'd like to recommend the Pledge of Allegiance returning to the City Council chamber proceedings, and I will demonstrate. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, liberty, and justice.
Members, with a show of hands, is there support for adding the Pledge of Allegiance to a future agenda? Seeing none, the motion fails. The time is 8:08. This meeting is adjourned.